interventions on communities under the themes of livelihoods, education, health, and migration. Over to you now, Anamika.
Thank you, Lemon, for that introduction. So I will just start by talking about the kind of approaches we take while looking at the energy access program and WRI. So looking at the energy access intervention or any kind of program, first of all, the idea is to look at the needs of the community itself, who we are working with. Looking at technology suitability, looking at energy aspirations of the community, and also the productive uses of energy within various agricultural practices. Then going ahead with the interventions, looking at various socio-economic impacts like increased access to health facilities and services, improvement in livelihoods, increased enrollments in school, increased agricultural efficiency. Going on the right, looking at environmental impacts like reduced greenhouse gas emissions, reduction in air pollution, reduction in dependency of fossil fuels. However, looking at such a large component within interventions, it gets challenging, and not just for us, but for a lot of people working in the energy access space. Various challenges like communities needs will vary across geographies, and we need to sort of look at interventions and M&E processes from that perspective. The technological variance itself, should we have a technology agnostic approach or a technology specific approach? Even though the M&E can be scaled, planning of the methodology and approaches need to be very contextual. A lot of times communities to transition to cleaner energy might be dependent on a lot of social norms and values, and thus the M&E and evaluation of a lot of behavioral components are really important and complex. Moving on, what could be M&E within energy access for people working in this space? So first is the recognition of the impact of energy access programs with various developmental themes like livelihood, health, education, which creates the opportunities towards the assessment and evaluation of energy access programs very differently. Also identifying components of equity within M&E, especially while working with these developmental themes across communities. Also looking at the whole spectrum of the input, output, outcome process within M&E, which needs to be a lot more dynamic. It cannot be a one standing for all. And thus there is a need to recognize that these are separate but also interdependent methodology and approaches towards energy access. And thus there is a need for looking at various experts with various experiences who need to come together to sort of address these processes and complexities of such a program. And for today, we have such experts who have worked within M&E portfolios in various capacities and geographies with us. I will now give the mic over to my colleague Lanvin for the introductions.
Thank you so much, Anamika. Just before we get started with the presentation, we'd like to start off with a quick interactive poll. The poll will be launched on your Zoom screen, and you will have around a minute to respond to it, and we'll just see the results before we get started. I hope the poll is now visible. Feel free to, it's obviously a multiple choice question, which talks about what are the different components of M&E within energy access programs according to you. So feel free to answer it, and we'll just give you 1 minute. Just another 10 seconds to go. Great, thank you. Thank you so much to everyone who's participated. I will just share the results here. And I hope they're now visible. I think a lot of answers coming in. If there was an all of the above, I think that would have also got a lot of hits, but As we can see clearly, the community needs assessment is something that is very well at the top of component for M&E. But yeah, I mean, there is an equal sort of number of selection for everything else. Of course, the second being M&E plans. So I'll just stop sharing this. But essentially, in the call today, I mean, these are all components or different components of M&E, and this panel today will discuss a number of these components in depth. So yeah, I mean, these components include the system needs of M&E processes within the energy access programs, like community needs, aspirations, technology assessments, and interventions, alongside other acronyms that practitioners have to deal with and carry out. The panel will also discuss the importance and incorporation of various processes towards capturing these changes and the need for these systems to be seen as a strategy towards building community-centric interventions. So now getting into the first set of presentations, I would like to invite Phineas Chabuela, who will talk about operationalizing and setting up M&E systems in energy access programs. Phineas is a development specialist based in Zambia with over 16 years of experience in the private sector development, monitoring and evaluation, and SDG-related business development. He's co-managing a development consulting firm called Dial Direct Limited in Zambia. He's also previously worked with numerous organizations such as UNICEF Zambia, Bongo Hive Technology Hub, Co-Water UK, and GIZ Zambia, to name a few. So over to you, Phineas.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and welcome to all the participants from all over the world. As has been said, my name is Phineas Chabuela. Feel free to call me Pen. I'll be talking to you on the operationalizing and setting up of M&E systems in energy access programs. And I'm contextualizing it from the Zambian context, as this is where one of the most recent M&E systems for an energy-wide sector has been developed. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. As I mentioned, the basis is Zambia, and the strategic priority for the energy sector is to develop and manage energy resources in a sustainable manner, and this should benefit the people of Zambia. We're talking about people, individuals, we're talking also about businesses and other sectors. The objective, and this is in the country's Vision 2030 document, is all about creating conditions that ensure the availability and adequate supply of energy. M&E was obviously identified as an important aspect of this phase of this sector, and phases 1 and 2 of the development of the M&E plan were completed, and we're now operationalizing the plan in Zambia, and this started in 2020. So we identify the need for an M&E system in Zambia. Why is it important? It is because it helps with policy, it helps with practice. And in Zambia, the M&E system development actually took over like a wildfire with the setting up of a Department of Monitoring and Evaluation under the National Planning and Finance Ministry. And as of 2019, there was no integrated sector-wide M&E system in place. So everyone was working in silos. The systems used by the various stakeholders that were working in silos in their own right were, they had challenges. There were discrepancies in definitions of indicators. There were inadequate tools. They were not even standardized in most cases. And the various M&E softwares that are at the disposal of M&E practitioners were not available in the case of the energy sector. This is where the Ministry of Energy came together with the EU delegation in Zambia to develop the energy sector M&E plan. Thank you. Next slide. So partnerships for energy M&E, and this is a very important aspect of operationalizing or even developing M&E systems, M&E plans, frameworks. The thing is, the Ministry of Energy of the Republic of Zambia took ownership right from the get-go, and they are also taking ownership of the implementation as well, the operationalization of the system. And with the funding of from the EU for a specific program, because you know how EDF, these are European Development Funds work, there must be a program and there must be projects, and these must follow a particular criteria. So the overarching program was called, or is currently called, Enhancement of Policy, Legal and Regulatory Environment and Capacity Building for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. Quite a mouthful, but it doesn't get better because we have another mouthful of a project under this same program, which is Increased Access to Electricity and Renewable Energy Production, called IRA. So these two institutions came together, engaged the services of various consulting firms such as DT Global, Practical Action, and Nearest Zambia to implement the program. And part of that implementation is actually the M&E plan operationalization. Thank you. Next slide. The main takeaways from the process. The first one, obviously, we must see at the end of the process an M&E plan. Stakeholders should have been mapped. Theory of change should have been developed. Results frameworks should be in there, and results-oriented indicator matrix. This was a must. In terms of next steps after developing the plan, we needed to see an operationalization strategy. And this should have been, and I'm speaking in this tense because we will see from the next slide that most of these things actually did happen, but from the programming side of things, we needed to see stakeholder capacity assessments done, capacity building done. We needed to see comprehensive indicator manuals developed, and also management information systems and performance monitoring systems also developed. Thank you. So how was the energy sector M&E plan developed? Obviously, the first stage would have to be some kind of desktop review, and this was very extensive. There were consultations internally within the Ministry of Energy. There were extensive consultations with external stakeholders and relevant stakeholders as well. We also had a process, a very detailed process of the development of key indicators, which included goals based on internal and external needs, with a focus on Ministry of Energy's needs to fulfill its policy or its mandate, in short. With all this information, the first draft of the M&E plan was done after several iterations and receiving comments from the stakeholders. The plan was finalized. And it is at this point when I actually joined the team to actually now start the process of operationalizing the M&E plan. Thank you. Next slide. So what does a plan look like? The energy sector monitoring and evaluation plan. It has all the major aspects of a good M&E plan. It has results-based framework. It has an actual plan for monitoring. It has an M&E matrix. It has data collection and processing guidelines. It also has plans and directions for carrying out evaluations. In terms of implementation mechanisms, the plan also spells out what the various institutional arrangements are, what the legal framework is in terms of M&E, in terms of resource mobilization, and of course, the implementation mechanism for monitoring the plan implementation itself. There are several stakeholders who are linked to various indicators, and knowing exactly who is doing what is also important. Finally, there are issues to do with data flow and reporting, annual performance review, and definitely reflective learning and communication. Next slide. So how is operationalization going? We take the M&E plan. First thing is first, we need to let the people know that the plan exists. We need to bring the stakeholders, we bring the various partners, we bring the players within the energy sector to a public launch of the plan. After that, we go straight into capacity assessments and capacity building. M&D related capacity building was conducted around this time last year. And there was development of terms of reference now for the next phase of operationalization, which had to do with the energy management information system. So this MIS has been developed and has gone through various iterations. And the next step of that is naturally to launch the EMIS and see how it works, carry out various quality assessments and data verifications on the other side. So this is the stage that we envisage will take quite a bit of time, first of all, because of a few issues to do with equipment which need to be sorted out, and these will be discussed in more detail in the lessons that we learned. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you. Talking about the lessons. Now, we're talking about acronyms here. You know, M&D is always going to have M&D and this, M&D and that, add another layer to it. I know for a fact that the Ministry of Energy wanted information. They wanted data to be processed. They wanted to know what was happening. So the main focus for us had to be reporting in addition to the conventional monitoring and evaluation. But if you remember from the contents of the monitoring and evaluation plan, you'll see that there's a detailed part which talks about learning and communication, which also forms part of the process of monitoring and evaluation of the energy sector. But we've learned a lot going forward. I mean, it has taken the best part of 2.5 years to come to this stage. We know that we need partnerships that bring in the financing, partnerships that bring in the interest and the energy to actually gather the information, gather the data, process the data into usable information for policy making. We need to consider also as you go forward with the M&D plan operationalization that government strategies are important. Whatever plans the government have for the energy sector have to be included in these. It is important to keep them as a key stakeholder and to consult them on an ongoing basis. There's need for continuous improvement based on operational monitoring. We also appreciate that there's need for capacity building of stakeholders. That is a key aspect of operationalization. Otherwise, the system will gather dust on somebody's computer. Government bureaucracy is a real issue, especially when you're talking about the procurement process. So things need to be planned in time and done in time. Last but not least, we're talking about data and information security, which in Zambia, we involved the National Data Center through the Zambian government Smart Zambia initiative. And these matters are being taken care of through that. And obviously, like I mentioned, there's need for a lot of communication as this helps with ownership, this helps with continuity. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to share these lessons with you. And with this, I will submit my presentation. And I thank you very much. Good day.
Thank you so much, Phineas, for that. I think it was a great start to this panel. I'll just summarize about a few points and then we'll move on to the next speaker. So first of all, thank you for talking about the biggest challenge being the discrepancies in definition of inadequate standardization of tools, because I think we all sort of, face that. It's like a big wide field where we get lost from time to time and we have to come back. Also, I think you're talking about the complexities of the whole ownership, planning, and operationalization of the system itself is sort of a great introduction and realization to say that, it's not just the M&E research or the evaluation of the process. You need to sort of plan it out really well. Also, I think it's interesting to also note, talking about the involvement of vast number of stakeholders. So not just about planning it, but also looking at it from a very strategic point of view before we sort of start off in the process. I will now request Ladwin to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Phineas, and thank you so much, Anamika. Next up, we have Marlistia Chitraningrum, who will speak on the importance of technical assessments within M&E systems of energy access interventions. Marlistia is Program Manager of Sustainable Energy Access at the Institute for Essential Services Reform, or IESR. She spearheads IESR's work on creating an enabling ecosystem for inclusive, sustainable energy access for all. This includes advancing the solar energy discourse and policy works, driving narratives for high quality energy access beyond connections, and growing Solar Hub Indonesia by IESR. So over to you.
All right, thank you. Network bandwidth is a little bit low, so please let me know if my voice is breaking or it's not so clear. I'll share my screen now. Yeah, I hope everybody can see it.
We're still waiting for it.
Sorry, I think I just lost the connection.
Okay, we can't see it yet. Marlistia, could you reshare your screen possibly?
Yeah, sorry. I
No
mean
worries.
the connection is. I hope it's all right now.
Yes, it works. Perfect.
Okay. Hello everyone. Greetings from Jakarta, Indonesia. It's already evening here, so good morning and good afternoon to everybody from across the world. Today I will talk about energy access redefined, because we were going to talk about the technical assessment in terms of monitoring and evaluation for energy access. So just a little bit about Institute for Essential Services Reform, where I work currently. So we are a think tank in Indonesia focusing on the field of energy and environment. We focus on the energy transition issues in Indonesia by advocating a public policies that rest on data-driven and scientific studies. So evidence-based advocacy. You can go to iesr.or.id for more profile on our institutions. And so then I will bring you to this picture. This is something that's always being repeated over and over in news. At night, a mall with a lot of lights, but also there is a certain location in Indonesia that still relies on just a small or a very simple solar light. By official statistics, the indicators that Indonesia's government use to measure energy access, our electrification ratio is currently 99.45%. So it's almost universal energy access on paper. However, there's always this anecdote saying that the electricity consumed by one big mall in Jakarta, that is the capital city, is sufficient to power an entire small town somewhere across Indonesia. So there is a contrast between energy access and energy consumption between one place to another, and especially between small town, villages, and also for big cities. So if we talk about technicalities, Indonesian government use this indicator to measure energy access and especially electricity. It's called electrification ratio, which use exclusively and quote unquote lighting source. So only lighting source is measured, not electricity for productive uses or for education, or for economic and welfare improvement. And that's the problem, because there is no other definition related to productive use of energy, meaning that even if a household is connected for a simple lighting source, then it is considered electrified and included in the ratio that's used by the government. And there's another measurements that use for energy access. It is if one or more household in a village is connected to a lighting source, then the village is classified as electrified. this is a little bit silly as to our opinion, is that if only like one household over 50 households in a village is connected to a lighting source, then the whole village is considered electrified. So it's not just it's not an equitable energy access, and that's why monitoring and evaluation for energy access in Indonesia is quite challenging, because the only technical indicator used is electrification ratio. What we have done so far is that we try to push this discourse on energy access to see that it is beyond connection, it is beyond 100% electrification, and how we should consider energy delivery and energy provision from a bottom-up approach. I have to share that IESR is not an implementing organization.
Sorry, Marlistia, your voice is
For
breaking.
energy access or term energy access.
Maybe it would be better if you switch off your video.
I should stop.
Yeah. You could continue sharing, but switch off your video to save bandwidth. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. I hope it's not breaking now.
No, it's better. Yes.
Okay, great. So let me reiterate what I've previously talked. So based on our work with evaluating energy access in Indonesia and its technical indicators, so it is our job to pilot some things that consider a bottom-up energy delivery approach that consider energy for community and what they need and how they can be involved in the energy planning process. So this is the principle of the pro-poor energy delivery system that we want to employ. That monitoring and evaluation will take a really important part of this energy delivery system. Is that we want to incorporate socio-cultural context. That means the community assessment. Is there any social cohesion or conflict? Is there any social norms that we need to think about? What's the capacity of enterprise within the community? Or some kind of technical indicators such as willingness and ability to pay for goods or services or for energy access. And then we also have to think about the enabling environment there. Is there land rights associated with the community? Are there supportive regulation that are already in place, or do we need to actually create one? And also incentives from the government, be that the local government or the national government. And then we put it together into an energy delivery model that incorporate all the aspects, and also asking the community what they really need and what they really want for the energy access. And then we're also thinking about what kind of additional support services, external support services that's needed to provide energy access within the community. And with that, this is the 6 steps that we employ for the energy delivery model that all incorporate the monitoring and evaluation aspect in there. Is the first one is we need to identify what's the starting point for the community, to ask the right questions. What are the data that we actually have, what we don't, what we need to ask to the community, or we need to ask to the government or other stakeholder. And the second step is to be inclusive in all our process, because this is a bottom-up energy approach. That stakeholders will have to participate in the design process.
Hi, Marlistia, are you there? Oh, okay, I think she dropped off. Should we wait for like 30 seconds and carry on, or do we get in Marlistia back again? Okay, I think we'll just wait to see if she reconnects. else we can move on and then come back to her again. Hi, Marlistia, are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No worries.
My internet connection is really bad. I'm so sorry for that.
No problem at all. I think you could just start over from your last slide, the previous slide that you were sharing.
Yeah, I hope this is fine.
Yes, this is the one.
Okay.
Yes.
So I realized that it's not only energy access that's the basic right for human, it's also the internet connection. So pardon for the problems. Okay, so after I think we'll just go over it very briefly. So we need to identify the starting point, understand where we're at and what gaps that we identify, be inclusive in the process to include all the relevant stakeholders, build understanding on what the needs and wants of the community, and also is it energy needs or non-energy wants. And right after that, then we include all the community to develop a value proposition. Then the first step is to design and test the value proposition. So the energy delivery models will result in several options of energy access or non-energy needs, of which then we also will identify what kind of monitoring and evaluation parameters we need to include it to measure that this project is actually a success. And then the fifth and the sixth step is the final steps of the whole project is to optimize all the things that we have planned, the value proposition that have been chosen by the community, and then implement the project and monitor and evaluate the project as we go. And actually, to make this delivery project easier, we use this delivery model map and canvas, usually used by economics, to do a business proposal. Because to see this in a more comprehensive way, the energy and non-energy needs, then we are able to find the indicators, the evaluation metrics, and also the monitoring steps that we need to ensure that the energy access really impact or benefit the community. This is just an overview of the map and canvas that we use. And so by implementing this project in Eastern Indonesia, it is a very remote village. It's 55 kilometers from the nearest city capital. Not really a city, but a town. So you need like 3 hours from the nearest town to go to that village. It is already grid connected in early 2021, but only limited houses can be connected to the grid. It has around 600 people now, and most of the community members are farmers. So they farm cocoa, coffee, clove, and candlenut. And what surprised us within this project implementation is that what they need are not actually basic services. Because if the government defined the energy access as electrification ratio, meaning that the household connected to electricity access or grid, what they need is not that, it's beyond that. So they want to have energy to increase their income from coffee production, to increase the quality and also the farming process. They also want electricity to improve the education of their children, because they realize if you want to improve the welfare or the economics of the family, then they need a good education outcome. So these are what comes into our monitoring and evaluation metrics so often, is that if we are misidentifying the problems, then it will lead to the wrong solution. If we choose the evaluation metric only based on the technical indicators set by the government, i.e. electrification ratio, then we cannot measure what's the impact of energy access to the coffee production or to the educational improvement from the families. And then if we don't involve all the community members, be that the government, which level of government, or the other community surrounding the village, then we also don't understand what are the energy access would mean to them. Is it only for the village, or it will continue to expand the outreach to outreach to the surrounding villages. And if we want to ensure that the program is impactful and sustainable, then we need to identify what kind of energy sources that they can have. Is it solar energy, micro hydro, or biomass based on the availability in their village? And what are the options to actually make people willing and able to pay for the services? And because of this case that we have, we realized that no one size fits all. And because we do have participatory energy delivery plan with the communities, then it will also require a participatory monitoring and evaluation as well. This is an ongoing pilot, so we have been with the community since 2016, so almost 6 years to now. So we focus on the changes and stories. And if I recall from previous presentation, there is theory of change as one of the framework to measure this. We also employ theory of change, more significant changes, and also outcome harvesting to see how actually the energy access create changes for the communities. And because it occurred differently at individual level, at school, for the teacher and the student, and also collectively as a community. So we're gathering all these stories to understand that we cannot set the evaluation or monitoring metrics as it is. We have to see it from different perspectives, from different stakeholders, and see how it goes during times and within years, because sometimes we cannot observe the changes in 1 year only, but it is within multiple years. So that's the lessons that we have for this pilot projects. Then I do hope that monitoring and evaluation, be that with all the framework that we have, theory of change or other method that we have, it also understand the context within the energy access provided in the community and see how it evolves over time. Thank you so much. And I hope it gives a lot of context for our discussion today.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It was a great presentation, great to look at the kind of work which is happening. Just to summarize a few of your points, I think one point which I really like was the whole definition in itself, where we're talking about standardizations, like Ben sort of spoke about, and how there's an important need to sort of look at these developmental definitions, like you spoke about education, you spoke about productive uses of energy, and also how within all of this, how keeping the community is the most important thing, and the whole moving ahead with the community with the energy access project and not just the project itself. And also how towards the end where you spoke about changes could be captured and illustrated in various forms. It doesn't really need to be one number or two numbers in the narrative. It could be like measured differently, and that is how we as M&E people could also sort of bring in a lot of like transitions within this itself. Thank you so much. Landman, over to you.
Thank you so much for the insightful presentation. Now I would like to invite Namrata Ginoya, who will speak on inclusion of resilience in M&E. Namrata is a Senior Program Manager for Resilience and Energy with WRI India. She's a climate resilience and disaster risk reduction expert working on research, policy advisory, and knowledge management in agriculture, water sanitation, health, and energy sectors. Over to you, Namrata.
Thank you, Lanvin. Yeah. Oh, and I can go to the second slide directly. Thank you. I'll give a very quick brief about energy access in India, specifically about the last 5 to 10 years. In 2017, India launched a 100% household electrification program called Saubhagya. The program provided household electricity connections at an unprecedented rate. And in 2019, the country declared itself 100% electrified. Especially willing households have been electrified. Leaving aside the robustness of this data, access to electricity connections has been the sole goal of this endeavor. Continuous adoption and use and reliability of supply are issues plaguing the sector. And on top of it, the program has not reached health centers, schools, community governance centers, basically any kind of institutional load or even for livelihood activities. Next, please. Hence, our focus has been institutions. In the first phase, we focused on integrating energy in form of decentralized energy solutions in development sectors such as healthcare and education. In the second phase, we added livelihood sector and focused on integrating climate resilience and equity parameters in energy for development work. And right now we are establishing M&E protocols for all of the above. Next, please. Today I'll focus a bit more on climate resilience, not enough on energy access. We obviously follow the IPCC definition of resilience as it talks about managing climate risks to include shocks like cyclones and stresses, and also long-term issues like droughts. To build resilience, one can reduce exposure, i.e., relocate people from flood-prone zones, reduce vulnerability, i.e., climate responsive agriculture, or improve coping mechanisms and help them adapt to stresses. Examples could be improving access to emergency services, finance, even setting up new labor standards. Next, please. There are two ways in which energy access and resilience connect. The first one is energy access to build community resilience. Access to basic services such as drinking water, sanitation, education, healthcare, and even provision of irrigation for livelihoods. All of this can help communities adapt to climate impacts. And in many cases, access to these services is either contingent upon energy access or the service provision outcomes are enhanced by energy access. Energy is also required when accessing information, say weather forecasts and seasonal forecasts. During and post disasters, reliable energy access can help in accessing emergency services. If relief shelters have electricity, people can connect with the outside world and access to purified drinking water in the shelters. It can also be observed that shelters with electricity have improved women's safety levels in the shelters as well. And many of these places, when not being used as shelters, are generally schools or even community centers, basically multiple benefits. Next, please. The second part is to know and understand the impact of climate change on electricity infrastructure. As we see in the first picture, if your new infrastructure for which you painstakingly got some climate finance or some clean energy subsidy is not designed to be climate resilient, all that progress will be quickly lost. Many have touted decentralized energy as an adaptation measure to the grid. One climate incident does not take the electricity out for unaffected areas, and it is easier to repair and restart. But we also need to understand that these decentralized systems are also affected by climate. And hence we need to design these solutions after thorough climate assessments and put in place operation and maintenance mechanisms that reduce downtime. In rural areas, in fact, we've actually seen how once a system is done, it takes days or even weeks for the vendor to arrive and repair it. For community projects, financial planning for O&M in case of normal or even disaster affected breakdown has to be considered. And finally, M&E, designing M&E systems to capture these issues so that there is constant feedback to improve the infrastructure, as well as its supporting systems. In the second picture, you can see it's an off-grid system of floating solar in flood-prone areas of Assam state. These solutions have been developed considering future climate projections. I would, however, like to note that floating solar is not the solution for all flood-prone zones. In fact, large-scale floating solar has a lot of detrimental impact on local biodiversity as well. But moving on, next please. So resilience indicators, what are the challenges? Measuring development effectiveness has been a priority, and it's a persistent challenge for decades. And when you mix resilience into it, it becomes even more complex. First, resilience, even though I just defined it, is still subjective. And in many cases, resilience can be directly observed only when a shock occurs and may depend on the type and magnitude of the shock. As a result, it is very difficult to monitor and measure. Resilience has been logged by measuring inputs, that is, how much finance has been available for resilience compared to pure development and mitigation. It is important. It is an important indicator, but we also need to focus on outcomes. The development practitioners think that just by continuing development, not all of them, but some of them think that just continuing development and reaching the last mile will result in resilience. It is not the case. Development activities need to be informed by climate assessments and for especially for new infrastructure and also when retrofitting existing ones. However, establishing universal resilience indicators is a challenge. Many indicators, though logical, have not really worked out in practice. The challenge here is attribution, since resilience-related outcomes have far longer time horizons than typical development institution project cycles. And finally, the biggest challenge is the flawed indicator. With its inability to measure exactly what we want, we can easily lead to perverse incentives for practitioners and favor outcomes that are very different from those intended. And it can lead to maladaptation or even harm whatever development gains have been acquired. Next, please. So what are the characteristics, especially when you consider resilience for indicators? First of all, efficiency. Say a mini grid has to be installed in a village. The area is flood prone. One option is to design a climate resilience system, which will add, say, 20% more to the cost. And the another cheaper option is to install a grid on higher grounds, which are not flood prone. Both solutions are informed by climate assessments, but one is more efficient. Second is context. Irrigation, as I said earlier, also has been considered for a while now as a universal adaptation solution. One of the ways in which we see this in India is the rapid solarization of diesel pumps and new farms that are adopting irrigation. However, we need to consider the long-term sustainability and adaptation here. In a region which has overdrawn groundwater to produce water-intensive crops, considering access to further free pumping may be a flawed indicator, and it needs to be supported by other natural resource-related indicators. Resilience indicators need to include equity and poverty considerations and should look beyond direct benefits to consider the development dividends. Spending $1 million in infrastructure improvement for rich households may have high avoided losses compared to poor section of housing. However, spending $1 million in resilience building for a section of society that cannot pay for its own reconstruction post-disasters will have compounded benefits. Transformational number of beneficiaries is one of the most common indicator. However, if we say a small number of finance is allocated to for meager adaptation benefits to an entire village, it will not really have equitable development or substantial benefits for anyone. Indicators such as these could take into account not only the number of beneficiaries, but also the extent to which the project can change lives and then generate sustained benefits. Comprehensive, the government departments everywhere work in silos. Say if a city is considered to be highly vulnerable to drought, based on this report, a water resource department constructs a new dam on a river to provide drinking water. This will be reported as an adaptation action. However, it's just one action. It has not considered impacts on the region where the dam is located. It has not considered conservation in the downstream regions. There is need to account for risks beyond project level. Instead, basically the desirable indicators that would need to be sufficiently situated in country planning processes and broader programs, and would need to manage multiplicity of scales from national to project level. And finally, robust, the indicator may label a project as climate informed just because some climate projections were considered while designing. Say the project is designed to be flood proof, but they did not consider the impact of extreme heat. So resilience indicators should incentivize projects that are robust. That is, projects that deliver development benefits under a wide range of possible climate and socioeconomic conditions. And last slide, please. Finally, a few recommendations from our side based on the research and implementation work that we've been doing. For donors and financing agencies, they need to support outcome-based indicators that have above mentioned characteristics, and also support long-term projects where M&E can be done and can inform other projects. Implementers, they need to understand project requirements, then float tenders, then set up contracts, consider how a particular project, decentralized solar solution for pumping, for example, would affect other areas of work. Need to consider the long-term sustainability of such solutions, need to involve other sectors, need to involve communities in planning and management. And the same goes for vendors who need to involve communities, which we've seen they don't as much, especially in India, and need to consider going beyond just installing a system. Need to identify how your project is going to sustain for a very long time and how it can perform under disasters, how robust learning processes can help improve, the skill of business as well. So overall, these have been the experiences that we've been seeing. Thank you, and over to you, Anamika.
Thank you, Namrata, for that. I think, first of all, very interesting presentation. Also, the whole introduction of the important component of resilience itself and how it is visible as well as invisible when we're looking at it from a programmatic perspective. Also, I think what I really liked is looking at indicators. A lot of us a lot of M&E people, like also me, we look at smart indicators, but I think taking the approach and going beyond smart and looking at a lot of other components which would be important to include in not just energy access, but also looking at resilience from different perspectives. Also, I think what was interesting to see was also not resilience in terms of installation of the systems itself, but also how it can be transformational and the way it can affect communities in different ways. That was a really interesting point. So thank you for that. Landon, over to you.
Thank you so much, Namrata and Anamika. So a large amount of M&E related work is usually done by implementing organizations based on donor requirements, but donors can themselves play a large role in ensuring and embedding a robust M&E framework in the projects that they finance. We now have Shishushree Pradhan to speak on the role of donors in partnering and supporting organizations with M&E. Shishu is the Director of Evidence, Measurement and Evaluation for Climate at the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, or CIF. She oversees evidence development, analysis, measurement, and evaluation of a range of CIF's climate change investment work across thematic areas such as energy, land use, food systems, cities, litigation, and finance. So over to you, Shishu.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you all see this?
Yes, looks good. You're yet to go on full screen.
I have clicked on it. Yes, perfect. Great.
Yes.
Hi all, I'm Shishu, and I'm a director in the Evidence Measurement and Evaluation team at CIF. So CIF is the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. We are the largest philanthropy in the world, working on children and children's rights and child protection. Some of the key areas we work in are child health and development, climate change, sexual and reproductive health and rights, girl capital, and child protection. That's a quick introduction on CIF. So how does CIF do EME? So this is just a snapshot of what EME means at CIF. EME stands for Evidence, Measurement, and Evaluation. CIF is very, very focused on data and evidence. The motto of our founder is all our strategies should be backed up by a strong evidence, and we should react based on what the data is telling us. We are one of those most privileged people where we have strong M&E budgets, where we strongly believe in the importance of monitoring and evaluation. It's not an afterthought. It's a part of the program. It has its own department and it has its own budget. So as a funder, we are privileged. So if you see our core areas that we work on under EME is how do we do evidence-based philanthropy? How do we do continuous monitoring and evaluation? How do we invest in technology for impact? Overall, what's our accountability and performance management? And finally, sometimes what's the evidence telling? How do we feed into policy? How do we move this on to at the scale level? So this is in general a snapshot of what we do at CIF. So I'll now speak about our energy portfolio. Our global energy portfolio currently on renewables is at 153 million, and we work in a range of areas like Europe, China, India, South Africa, Brazil, and Mexico. And for all our programs, we have M&E components. So I just want to take a bit of time to say how this works and what do we do. So the energy axis. So this is a tissue paper where I was trying to explain in very simple terms, what do we do? We think of M&E or even the work we do on energy, on land use, or any of the climate change areas as very complex areas. We come with a systems thinking. Everything's a broad system and the work we are doing is complex. So for example, when we started working a few years ago, if you see the X and the Y axis, we would have a small area in the box of like the time of the investment or the number of actors we work in, and we would think of a plan. We would think, how will the program work? What do we invest in? In due course, the number of actors or the number of organizations we work with, that increases and they start interlinking. Similarly, as time goes, the work becomes more complex. There are more actors and they interact. The reason I put this graph is to show when we speak about energy access, renewable energy, it's not that simple. There's a whole aspect of resilience, then there's adaptation, there's the shocks to the system, there's finance and all of that. How do you measure it? It is not as simple as it seems. So from the SIP perspective, we strongly feel our renewables portfolio, some of the core areas we need to push for is political will and public support of the governments we work with. How should they bring about policy and regulatory reform? And very importantly, how do we add public and private finance to push forward renewable energy? What does our team do? What does the M&E team do on this? So we have a strong role where we support our climate team on their strategy design. We actively engage in developing new insights to drive decision making. We then look at what are the gaps in the investments, how can they be addressed, or what can we push for the later time to see what can be done. And finally, we evidence the key interventions that are likely to yield the most impact. So what do? We strongly believe one is the component of developing monitoring frameworks, but also building internal EMA capacity. So when we speak about developing monitoring frameworks, at SIP, we have something called a framework that we use. It's called the Cascade to Impact. This is a very high-level framework that looks at impact level KPIs. So for example, for renewable energy in countries we're working, for example, India, we would look at what's India's NDC aspirations, how much of gigawatt of renewables should actually be there in the country, state-wise, how much should it be in the renewables, what's the mix of solar, wind, biomass, how do we bring that in? We then look at overall the renewables, how much will it be in the electricity supply, how much of energy is making into that. So we have very high-level KPIs, which is what we show as a funder to our board to show what is progress. But then sitting in that same cascade, we have something called as drivers of success, which in simple words are some of the outcomes we expect to see happening in India. Like, for example, are the discoms getting better? Are more coal power plants being shut down? Is there more solar going into the decentralized supply or rooftop solar, or even the agriculture, the solar pumps? How is it being linked to the grid supply? Or is it more decentralized, set up separately? What is happening there? What I really want to focus on, if there's one point you take back from, is this whole argument of attribution versus contribution. In the climate field, I think we love to use attribution, which I feel is a very difficult indicator to measure. What we try to push more is for contribution. For all the work that's happening on renewable energy and climate change, how is SIP and how are our partners contributing to that work? Based on that assumption, we do work on results frameworks. We look at intermediate outcomes. So we have a range of frameworks, which I won't go into this talk. But what we've been pushing for is where our partners look at more of indicators which are in the sphere of their control, and then which are the indicators which they can influence. How do we set targets? I do feel as funders and also in the climate field, some of our targets are ambitious at times, and sometimes it's very difficult to see progress at that high level. So how are we looking at targets? Are we being pragmatic? And a very important point of M&E is an indicator should be measurable. It should give you data. If you can't measure it, do we support our teams to help them measure it? Or what do we do on it? So that's why when we think about equity and just transition, we're investing more on how to answer those indicators. How do we get the data? And overall, sitting behind all of this, what SIP is pushing for is the KPI dashboard of all its climate programs. Now, this is one thing. So these are all ambitious things that SIP wants to see. Now, what do we do to support our partners to come up with this? So our two main avenues when we work with partners is either we provide funding for our partners to hire M&E positions. We do this with a range of our partners across the world, across the climate portfolio, where they can hire M&E advisors, M&E staff. We help them build up their M&E departments and we fund those positions. Or what we do is we hire consultants who work with a range of partners under help bolster their M&E work. So what we believe in is that these should not be ad hoc one-off support. So we believe in long-term or longitudinal consultancies where they last for the same period of our investment. If our investment is 3 to 4 years, the M&E team supporting them should also be funded for 3 to 4 years. We believe that M&E has to be done with our partners and not at them, even though we're seen and the M&E function is in the same page. Now, that might not always be the case, where sometimes there are disagreements. And I think that is the beauty of monitoring and evaluation. You can't always agree on everything. So what is it that the funder wants? What is it the partner can do? What is it the field is showing on the data? So quickly, like you can see in the slide, there are many things we invest in, like social network analysis, Kumu mapping, TOC workshops, M&E workshops. Something we're really trying to focus now is reducing the reporting burden. How can we be more adaptive in our reporting? But also these big other foundations or re-granters that we fund, how can we support them to come up with M&E systems where what they do helps all their funders, not just what CIF wants to hear? And this is something we are actively investing in this year, where we set up a range of donors to fund that work. And our main point is also to support and course correction. So just to recap, so we do a lot of portfolio-wide evaluation. So we will do a massive evaluation of 8 to 9 investments across 7 to 8 countries over a different thematic area or demographic. And we do these as long-term, and I'll quickly show you our thinking behind it. We believe in a development relationship of our M&E partners and who we work with, so that they invest in capacity development, real-time learning, and course correction. So what we look at is M&E should be adaptive management, that is, it's evaluation, monitoring as evaluation. So rather than just tracking progress against an assumed path to change, we believe that we should continuously assess the probability of achieving success as they process new information and refine their strategy. So what do I mean by this very long sentence? So let's say we start some work and we say, this is our current analysis, this is what the program's doing, this is how we do M&E, and this is how we do evaluation. This is just one of the cycle. We then invest, we continue to do this again and again and again. So we do 1 year or 6 months, the first round, this is what the program's telling us. Okay, this is where we are. Is this correct? Is our analysis right? Is our program on track? Are we doing the right thing? Actually, is the M&E team is it measuring the right things? Or should we review it? So we keep doing continuous monitoring. So we just don't invest in one impact evaluation that says, okay, this is what you did. You gave X million, you did this. These are your final results. We do real-time monitoring as a part of our evaluation, and we do course correction as it goes. So to give you a live example, this is our India program that we work, and I think WRI is one of our partners. You can see a list of our partners. The graph on top, if you see, it's a live dashboard that you can see. What it is doing is it's looking at all the activities on this energy investment that our program partners are doing. What are their targets and how are they doing against it, and who is doing how well, and what do they contribute to in the overall outcomes? Now, this is where we are. And if you see the dashboard below, this is something our program team has funded. And the Indian government, the NITI Aayog, has now adopted this too. It shows you India's NDC tracking. You can go and see how's India on its gigawatts of coal versus renewables. Where is India's target? How's it moving? So you see a high-level India picture below. And then what we try to show in our activities, what are our partners doing to move the needle on some of the stats we are seeing in the dashboard below? Now, echoing what I said earlier and how we do real-time monitoring, what we have realized is the activity level data is great, but it is not really showing us what our partners are doing at the very high level. So what we're now trying to do is come up with a dashboard that measures more the intermediate outcomes. What was key that happened because of the work of our partners that push these very high-level KPIs that we are measuring at country level, state level? So that is work in progress that is now happening with our partners. There'll be more training, more collaboration. So this is us learning that we need to take this forward. It's not like we didn't know the outcomes were required. Partners ready, were our M&E partners ready to do this? So we've taken up the first dashboard and then ramp it up to the next level. So just to show you very quickly, we also have something currently live, which is known as a renewables portfolio or meta evaluation. This has investments which have now come to an end. But the way we set it up is it looked at investments across different geographies to do holistic portfolio evaluation. So if this is CIF's TOC on energy renewables, how is our TOC working in different parts of the world? How are we course correcting? How is it that we don't follow one size fits all? How do we change in Southeast Asia? What do we do in India versus Brazil and Mexico? And what are the learnings that are shareable? What is it that's gone wrong? How should we course correct? This is in short how we've done some of the work. What we have realized here is that some of this is working. Some of the work from the India side, we felt that the way we should do the deep dive or the evaluation is not what we expected to see. So we've listened to our partners. We've changed the design of the evaluation 3 years into the evaluation. We've heard from from the field what they would like to see. We're making course corrections. And finally, we're now going to roll out the India deep dive, but similarly, our partner that does the M&E work also be doing changes. So what I really want to say is M&E is not just changes for the program team or the partners or the grantees implementing it. It is also for the funders. We also have to be that adaptive, and we should also learn it's not. It's a process that we do together. It's not done at or to anyone. So in short, this is for now, when we show our portfolio, we say this is how India is doing on the energy side at a high level. These are some of our results. These are some of our activities. What we want to move now more towards is more indicators where we can show different level of intermediate outcomes. How can we share that? So I do have the list of intermediate outcomes with me, which has been shared, but as we've not yet agreed with our partners, I can't share it in this presentation, but hopefully in the next few months it can be done. And that brings it to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yashashree, for that perspective. I think it's really interesting, and I think working with Sid, a lot of the team members would agree with you on most of the points. I think a lot of good processes to look at from a donor perspective is to see how you spoke about building monitoring and evaluation frameworks and capacity building and how that sort of goes hand in hand. And also sort of looking at the ways M&E can be supported by donors, which is a lot more planned and strategic, and it's not like an ad hoc process. Also, I really like the way you spoke about the portfolio-wise evaluation, where you spoke about collaboration with partners, etc., and how also accountability of teams, which is not just for the partners, but you yourself, the donor, speaking about it and sort of engaging with it, with your portfolios, but also with yourself. So thank you so much for that. Landman, over to you.
Thank you so much, Shishu and Anamika. Our final speaker of the day is Anna Mato, who will speak on the importance of robust systems for M&E towards successful impact evaluation and assessment. Anna is the planning, monitoring, evaluation, and learning manager for the Managing for Results team at WRI. She works to help staff throughout WRI and monitor projects to focus on the most impactful outcomes. Prior to joining WRI, Anna worked for the independent evaluation group of the World Bank Group, where she evaluated projects and sector-wide programs in the energy, water, urban development, environment, natural disasters, and cultural heritage. Over to you, Anna.
Yes, hello. Nice to see you all. Nice to be here. I want to start with, I have some sunflowers. The sunflowers, they follow the sun. So, as they face, and of course, so I think I just happen to have them here, but they're a bit symbolic. So today, you've heard a lot about setting up monitoring and evaluation systems. You heard a little bit about evaluations from our last speaker, which I'm very much a proponent of adaptive management, adaptive evaluations. In other words, evaluating as you go and making changes. But now what you're going to hear from me are actual evaluations. When everything is said and done, all the monitoring's been done, we collected the data, what happened. So let me share screen, and hopefully that will, it says to move out of the way. I'm trying to get it to move. Well, maybe if all right, I'll start this way. I'm not able to make it full screen because there's so many things in the way. Let me think. Well, we'll start, and then eventually earlier it went away, and then I was able to do full screen.
Right, so you are on your first page now. I think it's just next to the negative symbol below where you can share full screen.
But for some reason, the whole thing with the Zoom chat, Q&A, all of that is showing where normally I would, so I don't know how other people did it, but you can see the screen, right?
We can, yes.
Okay.
But it is just, it is zoomed in right now. So I think you have to zoom out.
Yes, it is.
At the
Yeah, and I
bottom
can't,
there.
yeah, I know. Okay, oh, okay, I found out how to move it. All right, we're good. We should be good. Here we go. All right. So I think the topic is going to be a little bit different than what was described, because I'm actually going to go through, or just tell you quickly, my acronyms are PMEL and M4R. I'm with the Planning, Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning Manager for WRI. I'm with the Global M&E unit in WRI, which is called Managing for Results. And I'm going to be talking about the evaluation of projects. So there's three evaluative studies that I'll be going through that I worked on. One is a project evaluation. It was a USAID project in Nigeria, and it was the terminal evaluation for that project. Then I will go through partnership evaluation. This was an evaluation that was done at the following acronyms: ESMAP, ESTE, and JIPOBA. And then a program-wide evaluation, which looked at all of the World Bank's projects as a whole program in energy access. So the project evaluation. So this was the U.S. Department of U.S. Agency for International Development. I was asked to do a terminal evaluation, a final evaluation for their renewable energy and energy efficiency project in Nigeria. And it was a small project that was expected to leverage a lot more money, because what they were trying to do, and it was very much an energy access project, even though it doesn't state it, blatantly in the title. Just a little brief background: Nigeria is the most populous. It's the largest country in Africa. It's also, it goes back and forth with South Africa as having the biggest economy in Africa. It's also the largest exporter of oil, and this is a significant issue in Africa. So that when the oil prices are high, like they are right now, Nigeria actually does quite well, because it can then bring in foreign currency, and it can buy products from other countries, such as things like solar panels. And you'll see that became a significant issue. So this project was set up to help entrepreneurs who wanted to do work on renewable energy products and bring them into the country and distribute them. They had the way USAID does evaluations is they very much focus on the evaluation questions and how they're answered and their indicators, which is different than the World Bank, which you'll see, which is the other example here. So the questions that they asked were things like, to what extent has this project established an improved financing environment for proposed investments in renewable energy? And again, the focus was getting the local people to be able to finance renewable energy. To what extent has REAP been able to increase energy to access, specifically access, not just the entrepreneurial piece, because there was a piece also for direct access, and to build national capacity in its training and certification for renewable energy. I will also say that the grid system is not gone through the whole country. So the issue was they realized that they will not be able to get the electrical grid everywhere. So that's why they were very interested in looking at renewable energy, because you don't need the grid. To what extent did the performance indicators reported by REAP, this is the M&E question, inform decision-making? Were they actually useful, these indicators? How can USAID improve its design and management of future renewable energy and energy efficiency activities in Nigeria? I will say that the big point, there's one interesting thing about USAID. They were about to do another project. This was the end of this one, but they wanted to wait till this project was evaluated so they could understand very clearly what was really needed next, what didn't work, and what they had done and what they could do. So they were really, and they're very interested in this. Unlike, I'll tell you later, unlike the World Bank, who is very defensive about what is found in evaluations. So these, I'll just show you these very quickly. These are the indicators, just to show you that when you see CDCS sub 1IR, these are the indicators that relate to their country strategy. CDCS is the country strategy that USAID has for Nigeria. So they do report up for those three indicators that you see there. And then they had below that the individual indicators for this project, which is things like expanded lifetime energy savings from energy efficiency or energy conservation as a result of, in this case, US government assistance, or Power Africa partner activities. And again, Power Africa is a big partnership to Power Africa, and a number of agencies were involved with that. Then the second one was number of beneficiaries with improved energy services using biogel fuel, which is an alternative kind of fuel. And on the other side, it was the capacity. This is where the private sector piece came in, total public and private funds that were leveraged by the US government for energy projects. And this is again what I was saying, the US government is trying to leverage money so that they could bring in more. They set up a credit facility so that entrepreneurs could access money to set up projects and set up solar energy organizations, actual companies that are private sector. And then number of clean energy certification standards established. I will say that under these indicators, they had sub-indicators, I will tell you that were very, very specific. So I'll just move on here. Okay, so now I'm just going to go straight to recommendations of the project, because the important thing is here, what was important from the M&E aspects of this project, what was the most important pieces. And as you see, there are a lot of recommendations. However, there are 5, 12 or something. At the World Bank, no matter what the size of the project, they only do 4 recommendations. Now, the recommendations that I will bring up here that are specific to M&E, you will see the 4th one here, which says rate of return for access to energy activities, would have shown they did not do a rate of return analysis, the economic and poverty effects of the increase in the amount of affordability. And so they did all these indicators, but they didn't do an economic. So in other words, if you invest this much money in solar energy equipment, what is your return? So, and I say this because we focus so much on indicators, and of course they're wonderful. But they've lost a lot of times. If you're in a field or sector where you can do some sort of rate of return, some economic analysis, some sort of sense of, for this investment, we got this much, it shows a lot more for sustainability. It shows that whether or not the project is financially sustainable. So that I just wanted to bring that up, that it's an important kind of indicator, a kind of analysis to do when you're evaluating a project. Another one, and they did not do that with this one. Another one that is important, I think, for M&E is over on the upper right, where it says implementers of project monitoring activities would be wise to take steps to avoid overburdening beneficiaries who are suppliers of indicator data. One of the things that was found was that USAID is very, very indicator heavy. And they look for data everywhere, and they really push people. And I found indications where some of the people on the ground, these are the agencies, the local communities who were expected to supply all this indicator data, were kind of resentful. And I got the sense that some of them may even have been making up some of the numbers. So be very careful on that end, that you're not you're doing indicators where people don't feel burdened, especially if they're just local people who are giving you this information, or local community organizations. So that was an important piece. Another piece, just the last one, I would say here. There were so many interesting aspects of this project. Projects to enhance, a last one, to enhance local economies, such as solar water lifting for irrigation, build on the experience gained by USAID. And the important thing was that anything that will build the local economy, anything that will, if it's a solar equipment that is used for agriculture or for industry, is really important, because it does build the economy. And that was another important finding. One of the other things I wanted to say was that they found that mini grids were very important, in that, you could put a whole bunch of grids outside of a small village or town, and it would it would supply energy for the whole town. Another thing, and this was mentioned earlier by one of the other speakers, the importance of operations and maintenance. When this project was started, they had a PR problem because many people felt that solar equipment that had put in had broken down. So what was the point of putting it in? So they had a big thing of solar energy basically had a bad reputation. People would rather use, which is what they were using all over the place, their diesel generators than put in, they'd rather buy a diesel generator than put in solar energy equipment. And the reason was that there were not enough people, technicians who were well trained and certified to fix, not only put these in, but to fix them. And they had bought a lot of cheaper ones, and I would say, you know, things change, but at the time they bought a lot of Chinese equipment that broke down very quickly. And so what they did, the US AID people worked with the German GIZ, the German development, who was doing a whole program to enhance the technical capacity of all these technicians everywhere, both in the countryside and in the cities, to make sure they knew how to fix all of this equipment, and that and it was very successful. They were very happy, and they would actually literally get guys who were the car mechanics in their little village would be brought in and taught solar energy equipment maintenance. And then the last thing I'll say on this one, again, there's a lot more I could say just in general about this project, because it was so interesting, was that there was a problem with importing the equipment, because when Nigeria has a hard time, I mean, it has, again, outside of the country, a reputation of corruption, et cetera. It has a hard time getting foreign currency. If it doesn't have foreign currency, it can't buy foreign products. And this equipment was coming from China, from Germany, from the US, you know, places that make things like solar panels and other things. And so they have trouble buying it, and they will also have trouble buying parts. So that's why the unfortunate thing is, although Nigeria has a lot of oil, and but they have no grid system, so that the oil can't become electricity. And although they have a lot of sun, which you think, let's just put, you know, solar energy panels, they are unfortunately have these obstacles. And those are the kinds of things that USAID was going to focus on in their subsequent project after this. So that's this was one particular project. The next one I thought would be interesting for people is this partnership evaluation, which I also worked on for the World Bank. And this was an evaluation of 4 partnership programs, which the Asia Sustainable and Alternative Energy Program, ASTE, GPOBA. Now, GPOBA works on an adaptive management basis. Like the people don't get money until they've done an output, then they evaluate the output, and then they get more money. And that's sort of the model for GPOBA. ESMAP, which is probably the biggest energy sector management assistance program, and Lighting Africa. Now, the thing, I would love to be able to say a lot more lessons about partnership in general with lots of different kinds of organizations, but this particular study was partnership with the World Bank, which is one of the, obviously, but they work with many other organizations. But I thought it would be interesting for people to see a partnership evaluation. Now it's not going next.
Hi, Anna, we have 2 minutes left.
Okay. All right. Yes. Okay. I will be brief. All right.
Thank you.
I will. All right. I'm sorry, Smith. All right. So just briefly, some of the findings here. This was done, the methodology was, it was a desk review of the key documents. There's a portfolio analysis of all of the projects that these 4 organizations did, interviews, and there was an in-depth assessment of their knowledge products. But in addition, there was a lot of looking at what indicators they were using. So I'm just going to keep moving. So the conclusions were the results frameworks for each organization was different. ESMAP had a strong results framework aligned with its theory of change. It is the most successful of these programs. In contrast, ASTE has never had an external evaluation. So it's not clear how good their framework is. And I'm just going to keep moving because I don't have too much time. Another conclusion was managing the donor push. There's a push to meet their donors' strategic objectives, and they put pressure on ESTE to adopt an overly ambitious results framework and indicators. So there are donors, which are basically the bilaterals, the Danish, the Swedes, various other donors that put pressure on these organizations, and was a problem. ESMAP, program oversight. ESMAP and GPOPA scored far better in documenting all of their results and maintaining well-organized project and grant databases. But ESTE, we had no idea, it was hard to find even what all their projects and activities were. And Lighting Africa as well. It was hard to actually keep track of and find out what projects they had, what activities they were doing. And conclusions on gender and equity was that, and I'll just do the top one, evidence that even with sophisticated targeting mechanisms, the benefits of energy access tend to flow to the better off households. This was mentioned already, in poor villages and communities. Points to the importance of sharpening the focus on the poor through use of complementary programs such as empowering the poor to participate in the design and rollout of of these programs, improving access to credit to enable the poor to finance connection charges, et cetera, and training and capacity building to ensure that the poor can operate energy equipment in a safe manner, et cetera. So the last one is program, and I will actually be very brief, even though this is the biggest evaluation. It was looking at all of the World Bank support to electricity access. And this wasn't done by me, but was done by one of my best friends. So it's okay with him to talk about it. Now this one looks specifically at key performance indicators for all of the projects that they reviewed, and all the numbers on access, how many customers, households, et cetera. Adequacy, did these projects expand, increase, or upgrade generation capacity? Reliability, you know, how often, like, was electricity off for 5 hours a day? Affordability, looked a lot at utilities and the cost of electricity. Financial viability, the improvements in the financial management, important cost-reflective tariffs, and in then welfare is the last, which we've talked, that has been talked about earlier. What were the impacts on income generation, gender equity, health, education, telecommunications, et cetera. Hold on. All right, and I was just going to show the framework for this study, but just very briefly, they take up top the country priorities and political commitment, on the bottom the exogenous economic issues, and then within that the usual things you would expect, you know, the outputs, you know, the sector intermediate outcomes, and the development outcomes, which of course are economic growth and welfare and gender impacts. So it just shows it's a very general, very big picture results framework for this particular study. Okay. The study's conclusions were mostly focused on what the World Bank could do, so I didn't include many of them, but there were a few conclusions of interest. Best practice country experiences show that the transition from low to high to universal access can be made within 2 decades. In recent years, Indonesia, which we've just heard from, Laos, PDR, and Vietnam have accomplished this feat, going from very low to almost 100%, to almost universal access. Planning the rollout of national electricity access needs to be comprehensive and synchronized, integrating grid and off-grid means, and bringing development partners together within an organizing architecture of many partners, one team, and one plan. That was one of the conclusions. And that's it. I had lots of other things I could say, but I'm already too long, but I'm happy if anyone has any questions. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Anna, so much for that. I
Sure.
wish we had more time to give you for the detailed presentation. But just a few things which I could pick up was sort of, I think, how we can learn from evaluations, and thank you for sort of presenting it across so many different contexts and so many different kinds of evaluations in the first place. What I sort of took from in one of your recommendations was not really overburdening communities with like indicators, like don't go overboard and try to sort of measure everything, but also be smart about it. And also, I think the third part, which a lot of us do not do, is looking at financial sustainability and how it is important for any kind of project we sort of take in and implement over a period of time. So thank you so much. Thank you so much to our participants. We now move on to the Q&A sessions. Can we sort of see if there is anybody who wants to ask a question? Raise your hand, put it in the Q&A box or the chat box over here.
I think questions have been answered in the Q&A box.
Yes, yes. Anyone else? I'm just going to give it 15 seconds. All right. Okay, so now moving on, I would like to invite my colleague Harsha. She's the Senior Program Manager for the Energy Program at WRI India, where she works on policy research and analysis for WRI's energy access and clean energy transition work. She's going to just put in a few important points we thought would be great to sort of share. Over to you, Harsha.
Thank you so much, Anamika. I don't think we have a lot of time to conclude properly, but let me take this opportunity to thank our speakers for sharing their experiences with all of us today. And thank you to our participants for joining us today. I hope all of you found all of these comments and commentaries useful, as did I, because these are very relevant for our ongoing work on energy access in WRI India. As my colleagues have mentioned earlier, we at WRI India are working towards improving our own understanding of, not just our understanding, also our partners' understanding of these kinds of assessments of impacts from projects, from methodologies, and also of learning from these impacts and communicating about them. That's been sort of one of the main focuses of our work on energy access now. And this webinar is sort of, this side event is one of the attempts that we have made to demystify these types of terminologies, and to be able to adopt and adapt whatever we are finding in our learnings across the globe into energy access projects where we are working in India, as well as in some of our other partner countries. We welcome you to join us in this process of demystifying these terms. And I once again want to thank our speakers for today, because these kinds of interactions is what will get everyone who is participating here and all the others who are involved in this network to be able to deliver better projects, learn more from these projects, and hopefully get to the impacts and outcomes that we really want to see. So with that, let me conclude this side event. And once again, thank you all for joining us. I hope you all have a good evening and a good day to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.